Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I was wandering the highways and byways of where I live, and it's a nice sunny day here, and it made me think that spring is definitely sprung and summer's on its way. Now, from a Napoleonic perspective, this means it is, of course, campaign season. This is the best time of year, I find, for having games. The kids are off school. If you're a teacher, then you're off school as well, which is quite nice. Everything's a little bit more laid back, and we can have those long summer evenings. We can while away playing a game with a beer or a glass of wine. This, of course, mirrors the fact that in the Napoleonic era, although before the Napoleonic era more so, summer and spring and early autumn were considered the times that the marching, the campaigning and the fighting would happen. That's not always the case, of course. The Battle of Eylau took place in the snow, and Austerlitz was in December. But, by and large, most of the campaigning, most of the fighting and marching was done in the summer months. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, cultural and logistical. Cultural, as in, most people at the time would be agricultural workers, so they needed to get in the harvest, and because it was much easier for carts of supplies and ammunition and all that kind of stuff to move along sun-baked roads. So summer is traditionally the era of the campaign. And what I thought we'd talk about today is how you can have a campaign, in your own Napoleonic campaign, how they can be fairly simple and straightforward. They don't have to be super complicated, although they can be if you want them to be. And how I think it can really help develop a gaming group and a passion for Napoleonic wargaming. So I guess we'll start at the simple beginning. What is a campaign? Well, a campaign is where two armies face off against each other, and they haven't just teleported onto the battlefield. There are things that have either led up to the battle and results that will happen after the battle. The Napoleonic era has its own perfectly self-contained campaign. There's a lot of them out there. You could have the Peninsular War campaign as a separate thing. You could have the invasion of Russia as a separate campaign. You could have the 1809 Danube campaign, or perhaps even a what-if scenario of a French invasion of Britain. But the one that we're going to focus on today is probably the most famous one, perhaps the most famous one in British military history, and it is the Waterloo campaign. Now, when I say focus on, what I mean is I'm going to use the Waterloo campaign as examples, and this can apply to any form of campaign, but I'm just going to pull examples from the 100 Days, just because I think we're all on the same page there. So just a quick rundown. You've got Napoleon coming back from his exile at Elba, landing on the south coast and being confronted by Marshal Ney, who told the king that he would bring the monster back in an iron cage. He failed to do that. The troops who were with Ney turned and sided with Napoleon. Napoleon then marched to Paris. The king fled, and the Congress of Vienna, which was a post-Napoleonic War peace treaty conference that was going on in Vienna, that broke up, and the Duke of Wellington and Marshal Blucher, they sorted their armies out the quickest and went to intercept Napoleon. Napoleon marched north. He engaged the British and the Prussians at the same time at Quatre Bras and Ligny, respectively. And the Prussians were defeated. They fell back, but still maintained contact with the British. The British fell back to Waterloo, where with a flanking attack from the Prussians, they finally defeated the French. There was another battle on the same time as Waterloo, the Battle of Wavre, and then when the Allies were pushing the French back, there was another one, the Battle of Genappe. But the ones we're going to look at really are Napoleon and his attacks, first at Quatre Bras and Ligny, and then Waterloo and Wavre. So when we're looking at a campaign, what does that mean? Well, it means that the troops who were involved in one battle might be involved in the second one. But overall, it's about telling the continuing story of your army from one battle to another. Now, the first way is the most old-fashioned way, and the one that I would not recommend, particularly if you are, doing this for the first time or maybe the second time. And that is going really, really in-depth. The best place for something like this would be Bruce Quarrie's Napoleon's Campaign in Miniature, in which you get things like the price of a horse or the average salary of a soldier, and you have to work out what your nation's income is and spend it this way. Now, don't get me wrong, it provides a super detailed, super interesting way of having a campaign. It's a little bit like playing Rome Total War or Warhammer Total War. It's got everything in there that you would want as a administrator / commander. You can tailor your nation's army to suit your will. So what's that? I want 1 regiment of Krazes instead of 4 regiments of Hussars. Well, you can absolutely go large and do that. It's very fun, and it's a really good way of building up an imagination, which is a country of your own design. The actual campaign mechanics involve a ordnance survey map and the average march rates of troops per day, and stuff like that. So, sorry, I'm laughing because it is a very good system. It's very old-fashioned. It's very Kriegspiele to an extent, but it's good, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's another way of doing it, and there's a slightly more modern way, and it's using hexes. Now, hex paper became very popular when Dungeons & Dragons was big in the 70s, and early 80s, I guess. And that's a really good way of, you can draw or superimpose that over a map of, say, Belgium. And, the Grand Armée can move 2 hexes per turn, everyone else can move 1, or something like that. And that's where you decide where the battle's going to take place. So this is having a strategic map, and then you go down into a tactical map. And anyone who's played Total War will know exactly what I mean here. You move the armies around, then when the armies clash, then you take that battle to the tabletop. Games Workshop used to do a game called Mighty Empires many, many years ago. I've got 2 copies of it in my cupboard I'm looking at right now. And they came with the hexes. It was a phenomenal game, but don't get me sidetracked. And again, you would work on your economy, the number of towns and cities you had in your thing. It was all well and good, but you don't need to go that far. This is not a realm simulator. You are just the commander of the army here. So it's just about moving the armies around, and then wherever they meet, they can clash. Now, this could be particularly good if you're doing the Peninsular War. Certainly the Salamanca campaign consisted of Marmont's moves and counter moves against the British, until Wellington, having seen that Marmont had stretched his men out too far, sent in the Fighting Third to go and smash some heads. So it could certainly work as a historical campaign, but for me, again, it lacks. It's a little bit too much whilst lacking at the same time. The manoeuvring of the armies is fairly interesting because you can get yourself to, say, block a mountain narrow mountain pass, or perhaps a ford at a stream or something like that. But if you're fighting in somewhere like Belgium, that's not really going to come into it. So you're just going to swap one flat bit of land for another flat bit of land. I wouldn't really say that it's that useful if you're wargaming something like the 100 Days campaign. So while it's possible to have a map element, I wouldn't focus on that. I would focus on the actual games themselves. And for that, I think there's 2 types of campaign that I would recommend. The first one is the tree campaign. The second one is the ladder campaign. And the third one is something of an amalgamation of the 2. So we'll go through what each one of those types of campaigns are. The ladder campaign is probably the easiest one. And a really good example of this is in the Quest of the Ring Bearer in the Lord of the Rings specials. And that's fairly niche, so I appreciate that not everyone's going to know what that one is. And that is a campaign where you work your way through, if not entirely, then somewhat pre-scripted battles. So, for argument's sake, if we're looking at the Waterloo example, so you would fight the Battle of Quatre Bras, you'd fight the Battle of Ligny, then you go and fight the Battle of Waterloo, the Battle of Wavre. Now, what you could do is you could have whoever wins the most battles wins the campaign. So you got 4 battles there. If you manage to win 3 or win 2 and draw 1, then you have won the campaign. You could say if you have a 2-all draw, then you go on to fight the Battle of Gnap. As I say, these are predetermined. In this case, they're predetermined by the real battles in history. And while the effects or the results of one battle can affect the second battle, they don't necessarily have to. You could have you could just have the order of battle for Quatre Bras, you fight the game, and then the next one you use the order of battle for Waterloo. That wouldn't necessarily be an issue. Now you could, again, use the historical results of that. So as an example, the 1st Battalion of the 33rd of Foot got quite a heavy mauling at the Battle of Quatre Bras. So in black powder terms, you could say that they're a standard unit in the Battle of Quatre Bras, and then when you come to fight Waterloo, they are a small unit. So you could do that quite easily. Or you could have the result of your game of Quatre Bras affect the battle, or the unit size at the Battle of Waterloo. So if they were completely wiped out, you could say, well, they were at the Battle of Waterloo, so we'll make them a tiny unit. Or if they didn't suffer any casualties at all, then they could come back as a standard unit, or maybe even a large unit if they've accepted refugees from another battalion that was wiped out in your game. But the key part of a ladder campaign is that the battles are almost preordained. So if the Allies win Quatre Bras, then you still go and fight Waterloo. If the French win Quatre Bras, then you still go and fight Waterloo. That's the point of the ladder campaign, is you work your way up or down the ladder, depending on what order you put the battles in. And, each one then leads on to the next one in a very useful way. Now, I tend not to refer to this as a campaign. I tend to refer to it more as linked battles. And I'm actually doing one of these at the moment for Epic Scale 30k. We're playing with Epic Armageddon. And we've just had the planet fall. The Emperor's Children have just defeated the defences of the PDF, the Planetary Defence Forces, have just been overrun. So the next battle that we're going to do, the Emperor's Children are going to be dug in those emplacements, and the Imperial Fists and the Blood Angels are going to be counter-attacking. We kept a note of the Emperor's Children unit strengths at the end of the game, but they will have chance to reinforce before the Loyalist Marines turn up. So that's an example of one game leading on to the next. As I say, for Black Powder, it's really good you've got the unit sizes. You can go up and down, so you can very easily put in, this unit was wiped out, but it comes back as a tiny unit, or this unit had maybe 1 stamina left at the end of the game, so that can come back as a small unit, or on a 4+, it comes back as a medium-sized unit, or there's loads of stuff you can do to change that. Now, one thing that I would advise against, if you're having the results of one battle affect the second one and you're changing the historical reality of it, is be very careful about runaway success. This is something that early Games Workshop development games, such as Necromunda, Mordheim, Blood Bowl, this is a big problem that they suffered from, which is if you win the game, you get a bonus. So for argument's sake, if you win, you get 100 experience points. If you lose, you get 10 experience points. Well, that 100 experience points helps you in your next game. Say you play someone who won their first game as well. So you're still pretty even. But let's say you win that one. Well, now you have 200 experience points, and the next closest competitor only has 110. You'll play another guy, maybe they lost their first or second game, so they've only got 100 experience points. You've got 200, so you beat them because you've got more experience points than them. So now you're on 300, and the next closest is still on 110 or maybe 210. So it suddenly snowballs. You win the first game, you win the second game, you win the third game, no one can catch you. The problem is with this kind of campaign, people are going to drop out. Now, this is what we really want to try and avoid, are people dropping out of campaigns. This is the death of campaigns. People may start off with good intentions, but as soon as they lose a couple of games, they drop out. Basically, people are 1806 Prussia. It's what I'll say when it comes to this. So we want to try and avoid that, and we want people to still be invested as the campaign goes on. And that's where the ladder campaign can come in handy, because someone may not be necessarily interested in the Battle of Quatre Bras, but they may be really excited about fighting the Battle of Waterloo. So they know what's coming down the pike, and they can look forward to that. It's also very good if you are running a limited time campaign. Now, limited time campaigns are great because they can really stop a lot of dropout, because if it's only going to last a few weeks anyway, people probably maintain their enthusiasm for that long, or it could even be over a weekend. So me and my brother are off to Stirling next week for a D-Day event that's going to take place over the weekend. So this is your warning, there will be no video next week, I'm afraid, although I may live stream some of the World War II stuff that we're doing up there. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Now, you could always have the scenarios of a ladder campaign locked in without necessarily having the armies. If you didn't want to do it based on the historical orders of battle, you could say, right, well, so similar to what I did with the 30k Epic game, the first mission is going to be the planetfall. Go and write a 3,000 point list or whatever. The second mission, you're going to be getting counterattacked, so you're going to need 500 points of reinforcements, but you can spend that 500 points on whatever you want. So it's easy to make a ladder campaign suit your gamers, and that's basically what you've got to do. It's got to be a dialogue between what you want to get out of the campaign and what you want your players to get out of the campaign, because ultimately they've got to be enjoying it in order to continue taking part. Now, I did say earlier on that there was another type of campaign, and that is the tree campaign. Now, this sounds very fun, very good for wood elves, but what this type is it's similar to a ladder campaign, but there are branches, as the name would suggest, that the games can go off, depending on certain things that happen in those games. Now, this is going to be a lot loose form, because this one focuses more on telling the story rather than a ladder campaign, which is playing through the events. So a tree campaign might be, for argument's sake, a perfect example, let's take Quatre Bras. So Marshal Ney is trying to force the crossroads at Quatre Bras. He's trying to do it as quickly as possible, or he was supposed to be doing it as quickly as possible, so the French can punch through, drive the Allies, prevent the British and their Dutch-Belgian allies from making a stand at Waterloo, and push them back to the coast. So the Battle of Quatre Bras, you can fight that game, and then you can decide on the victory conditions, can decide what happens to the next game. So for argument's sake, the victory conditions might be that the French have to exit the British players' side of the board. There you go. That's one for you, that one, Dan. Now, you could say if the French win, then they've punched through the Allied lines and the Allies have to fall back too far. You could say the British win if they prevent the French from pushing through, then they get a bonus in their next game. So a really good example of... then you would play a different kind of game. So for argument's sake, say the French punch through, then the next game could be a rearguard action from the Prussians, who are also having now to fall back because their allies have left them lying in the lurch. Or if the British win, then the next one could be a counter-attack by the British. Perhaps you're fighting the Prussians and a flanking force of British can turn up. So there are two possibilities coming from that one battle. Obviously, that means that if you fight the second battle, there are two more possibilities coming from that one, which means that there's been 6 possibilities of battles in your 2 games so far. So it's very difficult to plan any special things for an outcome, because you don't know where the story is going to take. And this is a problem, because it can be a problem. It depends on how frequently you want to play, but it does mean that your fantastic bit of scenery that you've built, or you've got ready, you may end up never using it. It's all well and good you having an absolutely perfect recreation of Hougoumont, but if the British get absolutely bodied at Quatre Bras and the Prussians do as well, well, there is no battle at Waterloo. So suddenly, your Hougoumond's a bit of a waste of time. It could be Napoleon's command point, I suppose. Whereas if you were doing a ladder-type campaign, then you would know that you're going to fight Waterloo, so you can prep that in advance. This kind of tree campaign, again, as the analogy would suggest, it grows and changes as the campaign goes on. And I would say this is best for probably 2 people playing. If you're playing with your kids, or you're playing with like your brother or your mate or something, then you can really get invested and allow this to change, and you can have input in both, from both sides as well. So I would recommend, if you are doing a very small campaign, in numbers of players, not necessarily in scope, but in numbers of players, and the tree campaign's really good for that. You've got quite a few different variations, and if you're happy to just go along with the story, then you can get some really cool outcomes from that as well. And if you've got 6 months to, it turns out that the British have been pushed back to Antwerp, so the French are going to attack the port whilst the British are trying to evacuate, La Coruña style, then if you've got time to build Antwerp, then that would be great. But that would obviously necessitate slowing down the number of games you play. If you only play every 6 months, then that could work perfectly. Now, for me, the best thing to do is to combine those 2 types of approaches. What we've done in our gaming group, if you can call it that, a collection of gamers, I think it's probably the better description, from up in the northeast, is we've had the Battle of Quatre Bras, we've had the Battle of Ligny, and we're looking at, realistically, what would the results of those battles have led to. Now, at the Battle of Quatre Bras, the British were quite handily defeated, and the Duke of Wellington was killed. On the Battle of Ligny, the Prussians were pushed back, probably a losing draw from the Prussians, that one. So what we decided would be more like is the British would fall all the way back, whereas the Prussians might try and make a stand. So we're going to fight the Battle of Waterloo, but not at Waterloo, somewhere behind, maybe Wavre, but we're going to fight that as if it were Waterloo. So it'll be the Army of the North, the Imperial Guard, the d'Erlon's Corps, the Marshal Ney leading his heavy cavalry, all that good stuff. But it's going to be against the Prussians. The focus is going to shift because we think that realistically Napoleon, if he defeated the British and the Duke of Wellington was dead, they'd probably fall back and Napoleon would keep his focus on Marshal Blucher. He wouldn't need to switch axis and go after the Duke. Now, obviously, it relies on us all getting together and playing a game. We haven't done one this year. Hopefully, we will later on in the year, but I don't know. But that's the plan for next time we do it. So it's about having the ladder campaign aspect of it is, yes, there's a Battle of Wavre. There's probably not going to be a Battle of Waterloo, but yes, there's going to be a Battle of Wavre. But we've changed the emphasis of it because of the effects of previous battles. Now, we're not going to worry about the casualties from the previous battles or anything like that. We'll just reset it a little bit. Luckily, the Prussians had a corps that wasn't involved at the Battle of Ligny, so we can just say it's reinforcements from there. And we can say that Napoleon's called up some more Marie-Louises and he's filled his ranks with those. But that's it, really. I wanted to keep it fairly brief today. I wanted to keep it a fairly short one. I just wanted to really put out some ideas for some summer campaigns. I was hoping that people will let me know that if they've got anything planned, any linked games, or how they are joining their games and perhaps growing their armies as well. Another really good way of doing a campaign is to do an escalation league, which is where you start off with, I don't know, 4 units, and then you increase it to 6, and then 8, then 10, and so on. And that's a really good way of pushing your collection forward. So is that something that you prefer? Do you prefer the maps and the price of a horse or a month's worth of hay? Is that the kind of level of detail that you enjoy? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, if you are coming to the Napoleonic Weekender under Eagles to Glory, it is only a few weeks away, terrifyingly. That is on Saturday the 22nd and Sunday the 23rd. The deadline for your lists has passed, but don't worry, I'm not as meanie like old Napoleon. I'll let you off a little bit. So if you can send them to me at the Napoleonic Wargamer at gmail.com, then I have set aside a day next week to go through all those. But I just want to say thank you very much for listening. There won't be a video next week. I am up in sunny Stirling. I hope it's sunny. And I am defending the beaches against the perfidious Albion. So in this case, I want to point out that wasn't my choice. I wanted to be the Americans, but my brother wanted me to be on the same side as him, and he wanted to be the Germans. So I'm not always against England, I promise. But we'll be doing that next weekend. I may film some of it. Let me know if it's something that you'd be interested in. But I will see you guys in a couple of weeks. See you next time.